The desert had a way of swallowing sound until all a man could hear was the creak of saddle leather, the slow draw of his own breath, and the eternal whisper of the wind dragging its fingers across the endless sands. And it was into this vast silence that Clayton Boone rode on the morning he signed his name to a piece of paper that told him Dry Creek belonged to him. $50 exchanged in a cramped Santa Fe office where the ink still smelled sharp and wet when he stepped back into the sun. $50 for a whole town that most men said wasn't worth the bullet it would take to shoot the lawyer who sold it. But Clayton wasn't the kind of man who listened to the laughter of saloon drunks or the mutterings of gamblers who'd lost too much at the tables. He was a man who had carved his life out of the rough rock of hard work, from driving cattle across blistering plains to breaking horses that no one else dared lay a hand on, and where others saw rot and ruin, he saw the shape of something that could be built again, a stake in a land where his sweat and grit might turn a ghost into a living thing. And so he rode west that very day, the papers tucked inside his saddlebag, the bay stallion carrying him steady as the sun climbed high, the hours stretching long until the world became a shimmer of heat, and then finally, at the bend of a dry arroyo where scrub mesquite plodded the earth, the bones of Dry Creek revealed themselves, not with grandeur but with the weary sag of a place left too long to the mercies of time. The saloon roof caved halfway in, the church steeple leaning as though tired from trying to point at heaven, the old mercantile's windows shattered into jagged teeth that caught the last rays of the dying sun, and as Clayton reined in, dust puffing up around his boots, he felt the weight of silence settle across his shoulders like an old blanket, heavier than the saddle he'd been carrying all day, a silence that wasn't just the absence of people but the presence of something else. The residue of voices long gone but not quite finished with their stories, ghosts maybe, or just the echo of human struggle pressed deep into wood and stone. But Clayton Boone wasn't a man who frightened easy. He tipped his hat back and scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing when they caught on the north end of town where two weathered posts stood upright with a cracked timber stretched between them, a gate of sorts, nothing fancy, just enough to say that once upon a time this had been a place with borders, with a beginning and an end, and it was there that his stallion slowed, ears flicking, hooves uncertain, because hanging from that timber like some dreadful signboard was a shape that at first seemed like rags or canvas left to rot, but as the stallion tossed its head and the wind shifted, the truth came clear in the failing light, and Clayton's stomach turned with the tightness that made his hand instinctively grip the horn of the saddle. Because it was no canvas, no bundle of rags, but a body, slender and swaying ever so slightly with the restless fingers of the desert breeze, bare feet pale against the dark wood, black hair falling like a curtain to hide the face, the buckskin dress worn and dust-caked, the rope cutting cruel against the throat, and even before he swung down from his saddle Clayton knew she was Apache, knew it in the copper hue of her skin, the delicate strength of her frame, and the old cruel truth that told him only someone full of hate had left her here as a warning, as a message carved not in words but in flesh, for the Apache had been hunted, driven, banned, and slaughtered in the name of law and land, and this girl was one more page in that long book of blood. But as Clayton's boots struck the ground and he walked toward her with the heaviness pressing in his chest, he realized there was something different, something not yet finished about this scene. Because the smell in the air was not the sour rot of long death but the sharp, metallic tang of a fight too recent, and when he drew the Bowie knife from his belt and cut the rope in a single hard stroke, the girl's body fell against him not with the dead weight of a corpse but with the fragile tremor of something still clinging to life, and he lowered her to the dust with more care than he'd ever shown to gold or cattle, his rough hands surprisingly gentle as he brushed back the curtain of black hair and saw her face. Bruised, chapped, dusted with grit, lips cracked and bleeding, but her chest, by God, her chest still moved, shallow and broken though it was, and her eyes fluttered beneath lids too heavy to lift, and Clayton Boone felt a fire ignite in his chest hotter than any desert sun, a fire that burned with anger for the cruelty that had left her here, with respect for the stubborn breath that refused to leave her body, and with the cold, iron determination that whoever had tied that noose would answer for it, because Clayton wasn't a man who asked for trouble, but neither was he a man who rode away from it when it found him, and so with one arm he gathered her up, noting the bruises around her wrists where rope had bitten deep, noting the raw welt circling her throat, noting the faint whisper of words she tried to form but could not force past her broken windpipe, and he hushed her softly, his voice low and steady like the lull of a stream. "Easy now, you hold on," though the words were more to himself than her, for her eyes cracked open just enough to show the glimmer of defiance still burning behind the haze of pain, and in that instant he knew this girl was not merely a victim, she was a survivor, the kind who clung to life with teeth and nails, the kind whose story was not meant to end at a gate in a ghost town, and with that certainty he turned back to his horse, lifted her into the saddle before swinging up behind her, holding her carefully against his chest as he nudged the stallion forward, the animal snorting and uneasy but obeying, its hooves clattering against the dry boards of the street as Clayton steered toward the old hotel at the center of town, the biggest structure still standing, a place that might yet offer shelter, though every step deeper into Dry Creek tightened the knot in his gut, for the silence here was not empty, it was watchful, and he felt eyes upon him though no figure showed itself, shadows long and deep between broken buildings, the sense that the town itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do, and as he carried the Apache girl across that threshold, Clayton Boone knew the price of his $50 purchase had already changed, for land and timber and empty saloons were one thing, but now there was blood, now there was vengeance, now there was the spark of a story that would not let him go, and he swore silently as he laid her down upon the dusty boards of the old hotel's parlor that whatever devils had left her to die slow would find him waiting, not as a man who bought a ghost town for a bargain but as a man who had just been given a reason to fight for it.